Welcome back to the main stage. I'm Jonathan Paskey, executive producer here at Develop Week Global Cloud. We have our first keynote for you this morning. Dan McKinney, he is developer relations lead at Cloudsmith. He's going to be talking to you about continuous software pipelines, why enterprises are going cloud native. Dan, if you'd like to join us here on the main stage.
Hi, John.
Hey, great to have you here, and go ahead and take it away.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. And thanks everybody else for joining me for this keynote session. Continuous software pipelines. Why enterprises are going cloud native. So in this session, we will discuss why enterprises are moving from on-premise and cloud-hosted solutions to completely cloud-native solutions for continuous software pipelines. We'll discuss and talk about what is cloud-hosted versus cloud-native. What are the real differences? And how does that impact improving and scaling and securing software development and deployment pipelines? We'll also take a look at continuous packaging. What is it and why do you need it? And finally, we'll take a look at how you can get started with a cloud native migration. A little bit about myself. I'm Dan McKinney and I lead the developer relations team at Cloudsmith. You can find me on Twitter at DevRelDan, where I tweet about things like package management and software supply chain security, and also my very serious interests in all things Lego and retro computing and gaming and music. I actually work as a DJ at the weekends. That's a fun fact about me. And that photo is of me while I was DJing, but that's another story for another platform. Now, look, I love developer relations. I'm really passionate about it, primarily because it's a role that combines building relationships and communicating and helping people. Increasingly, products and platforms are adopted not only on the strength of their feature sets, but also on the strength and the vibrancy of the community that they build around them. Developer relations is all about fostering this community. It's about enabling it to be successful and for it to get the maximum value from a platform. So then, what is Cloudsmith? Well, the short version is that Cloudsmith is the leading platform for continuous packaging. We provide a fully cloud native package management as a service. And we enable engineers and teams to set up secure, universal artifact repositories in seconds. Cloudsmith provides a single source of truth for all software that you build and all dependencies that you consume. We enable you to achieve secure artifact management, delivery, and distribution. And we support multiple package formats. We're very universal. And we're adding more all the time. So no matter what your stack looks like, we've probably got you well covered. We integrate with all the common DevOps and CI and CD tools that you already use and love. And it's probably no surprise for those that can place an accent, but we're headquartered in Belfast in Northern Ireland, although we have team members distributed from the US to Europe. So a cloud comparison. Now, there are a lot of cloud terms in use today, and it can be tricky to distinguish exactly what they mean. But when it comes to cloud native versus cloud hosted, I mean, they sound extremely similar, but in reality, they couldn't be more different. The cloud goes way beyond just storing and hosting. And although it's no longer new in any sense of the word, it is at the very heart of a whole new range of technical possibilities. And cloud providers are constantly expanding their offerings with new features and services and functionality. It's opening up new ways to build and deploy applications. And that's where cloud hosted versus cloud native comes in. Now, if we look back, the very first wave of applications that were migrated to the cloud, they were cloud hosted. They used the functionality and the features provided at the time to offer some advantages over on-premise applications. But this march towards the cloud, it hasn't stood still. It hasn't stopped. In many ways, it's accelerated. And the next wave of applications to take advantage of the cloud and its increasing functionality and features, well, they were not migrated. They were constructed. And that's cloud native. So before we go on, let's look at each of these in turn in a bit more detail. Now we'll start with cloud hosted, and sometimes also called cloud enabled. Now that refers to an application that's traditionally been installed on premise in an organization's data center on physical infrastructure. At a very high level, a cloud hosted application has been lifted and shifted onto cloud-based server instances in order to take advantage of some of the basic features that cloud providers offer, such as virtual resources. But the underlying architecture of the application itself largely remains the same. Now, an immediate advantage of this for a cloud-hosted application is that you're no longer responsible for managing and maintaining the physical infrastructure that the application runs on. But in the worst case, that's it. That's the only advantage. Legacy applications that have been migrated to the cloud, they were never built to take advantage of the paradigm shift that cloud providers present. The application can't take advantage of shared services or pools of resources, and therefore it's not as suitable for scaling. It doesn't have the elasticity. So what about cloud native? Well, the simplest explanation for cloud native is that it means an application that is born in the cloud, an application that has been architected and developed and deployed with the technologies provided by cloud vendors in mind. And it's been built specifically to take advantage of them. Cloud native applications are typically built using things like continuous integration, continuous packaging, and continuous deployment, orchestrators, container engines, and microservices. At a very basic level, it's all about how applications are created and deployed. Cloud native applications are increasingly architected as smaller and smaller pieces, and they share and reuse services wherever possible. They're designed from the ground up to run on physical infrastructure that the developers do not own or control. So they must think about failure and have resilience and redundancy in mind from the start. Also, cloud native applications are primarily API based and take an API first approach, which opens up new integration and scaling opportunities. And often, a hallmark of a true cloud native application is that it isn't available in an on-premise variant. Or if it is, the on-premise variant is missing some features or functionality that are only possible because of specific cloud technologies. So, why are enterprises moving on? Well, in my role in developer relations at Cloudsmith, I spend a lot of time talking to our customers, and I hear a lot of different reasons that enterprises give for favoring a cloud native solution. But some of them come up again and again, and these are the total cost of ownership, the performance of the solution, the security of the solution, and accommodating distributed teams. So let's discuss those. We'll start with total cost of ownership. This is a big one, as traditionally, what drove the move to cloud hosted to begin with was a desire to shift from capital expense on infrastructure and servers and data centers to operational expense on running costs. Now, cloud native applications, they shift this even further. Cloud native application vendors are usually able to provide quite clear and transparent pricing structures. Now, I recognize that this isn't always the case, but I'm sure people remember traditional software licenses that were priced per host or per CPU or even per CPU core. It actually got to the stage of adding scaling factors for different models of CPU. It was an absolute minefield to determine what the cost was going to be. Cloud native applications are typically offered as a SaaS, software as a subscription model. So the cost can be calculated or approximated quite easily. And of course, cost of ownership, it isn't just expressed in dollar terms. You also need to think about the amount of time and resources that will be spent on maintenance and managing any solution. Cloud native solutions are pushing forward with a fully managed service model, meaning they don't just provide managed resources, they also manage and maintain the application itself. From upgrades to security patches, there's no more, please install this patch or this release. You don't need to think about what version of this application do we have deployed and where. It's all part of the fully managed service. It's all part of the subscription. And what about performance? Well, as we touched on earlier, what really distinguishes cloud native applications is that they are built from the ground up to leverage the functionality that the cloud can provide. And one of the biggest areas this impacts is application performance. Now, it's immediately obvious when you look at something like scaling, being able to increase resources to cope with additional demand. This was one of the first drivers in the shift to cloud platforms. But cloud native applications, they go way beyond just simple horizontal scaling where you add additional resources to cope with demand, or vertical scaling where you increase the size or the compute power of resources to cope with demand. Cloud native applications with things like microservice architectures, they can scale down to the level of individual functions. Now that's a whole new level of scaling. It's more responsive, efficient, and able to even better suit increased demands, particularly spiky loads. It's a far more fine-grained approach to scaling than anything that has been migrated to a cloud-hosted solution can offer, which means as a user, you see even better performance from the application than would have previously been possible. Also, cloud native application architectures are natively better suited to being deployed across multiple regions and zones. So they provide better redundancy against failure. They have high availability by design, not something you need to accommodate at install time with things like multiple instances and clustering and replication, as you do with many cloud hosted solutions. So, what about security? Well, security is one of, if not the most important considerations. Now, excuse me, I'm not going to pretend that just choosing a cloud native solution is some sort of magic fix for all your security concerns. Wouldn't it be great if that was the case? Nothing removes the need for you to implement your own security, procedures and processes, scanning its source and shift left security. But what I would really like to address today is the idea that on-premise or cloud-hosted applications are somehow inherently more secure than a cloud-native application. Now, there are a lot of heavily regulated industries: finance, healthcare, automotive, to name just a few. And historically, there has been a preference here to own as much of the infrastructure and the applications that are in use as is possible. I mean, that's understandable. It seems like a simple, straightforward way to improve your security posture. But is that still the case today in 2021? Well, maybe not. A lot of the recent security breaches and incidents that we've heard about have, in fact, centered upon software and applications and platforms that were deployed on premise or hosted on private clouds. Take the SolarWinds breach, for example, where the build process for the Orion monitoring platform was compromised and malicious builds of the software were pushed out to users. Now, being on premise or hosted on their own clouds, it didn't reduce the blast radius of that attack for users. Networks were still compromised, data was exfiltrated, and we're still grappling with the implications of that attack now. Another whole class of attacks center around the idea of exploiting software packages that are used in application development. These are chasing the same objective, that is, to compromise a software build so that malicious software is delivered to end users through trusted channels. So really, what it comes down to is that when you are deploying applications and solutions, it's not so much how and where they are deployed that determines how secure they are. It's the security of the development and build process itself. And that's where cloud native solutions can have an advantage. Because cloud native solutions, particularly multi-tenant SaaS products, they need to have security concerns first and foremost throughout the entire development process. They are not deployed on premise or on a private cloud, and therefore they don't make any assumptions of the supposed security benefits that this brings. They're designed and built with the knowledge that they're running on shared infrastructure with many users across different organizations. It's an entirely different mindset towards application development from day one. And finally, What about accommodating and working with distributed teams? Now this is where a cloud native application really shines. As an industry, we've been moving along the path towards more distributed teams and remote working for a long time now. But the events of the last 18 months or so, they have greatly accelerated this process. I mean, you can see that right now. I'm at home, surrounded by my Lego and my retro computing things. So how do we ensure that all of our teams and individual team members like myself have equal performant access to the systems they rely on every day? Well, cloud native applications are the perfect solution to this problem. By their very nature, they're designed to be used without regard to where in the world you are located. They're multi-region distributed applications. They normalize the experience wherever you may be. You don't need proximity to a corporate LAN or a corporate network, or even to a specific cloud region to gain the best benefits. A cloud-hosted solution would typically need multiple instances deployed across multiple cloud regions with appropriate replication and clustering all set up to deliver a similar experience. And who is going to implement and manage all of that? We touched on this earlier when looking at cost of ownership. That's an overhead that doesn't exist with a cloud-native solution. It's fully managed for you. And also, this is really only going one way. I think it's highly unlikely we're going to see less remote work or less distributed teams in the future. Sure, we will make some returns to the office. Look, I myself miss seeing my colleagues in person, but we can't in all conscience roll out solutions and applications anymore that provide a better experience to some team members and not others, purely based on where they reside. So now, as we start to think about how can I move to a more cloud native pipeline, I want to introduce the concept of continuous packaging. In short, at Cloudsmith, we define continuous packaging as the art and science of continuously building packages and containers to securely automate software pipelines. Now, that's a nice statement for sure. But what do we mean? Well, it means the concept of treating all packages and software artifacts as specific units of value. And it's about building processes that allow you to manage and control the flow of these throughout your build and deployment and development pipelines. Continuous packaging helps to fill the gap between continuous integration and continuous deployment. But sounds good. What does it look like? Well, let's take a look at an example. Okay, so here we have an example continuous integration, packaging, and deployment process. Now, starting with CI on the left, we take our source and continuously integrate it, meaning we scan it for vulnerabilities and build it and package it for pushing to our centralized package store, our universal package repository service. Then we build a continuous packaging workflow that allows us to do things like isolate dependencies from untrusted third-party sources, like upstream package repositories. And we can verify and scan all packages and accept or reject packages as needed. Effectively, we're building out our software bill of materials, which, going back to earlier, is now a verified list of our units of value. And from here, we can go on to continuously deploy these artifacts then with confidence to our end users, our customers, or production systems. So in summary, continuous packaging gives your teams security and control and visibility and management over built artifacts and incoming assets. Now, just some of the core benefits you get from implementing continuous packaging processes are provenance. Provenance is about building a verifiable chain of trust for all packages and artifacts that you consume and also those that you deploy, with things like package signatures, checksums, and an audit trail of package life cycles. And isolation. Well, isolation is having the ability to proxy and cache packages that you consume from public or other upstream sources, and being able to tag them and quarantine them until you've vetted and cleared them for use in your builds and production systems. And then acceleration. Well, that's being able to accommodate all users and build systems in an equally performant way, regardless of location. And with a cloud native package delivery network, that's about leveling the playing field for all participants, enabling the processes to work effectively for all involved. And that's just some of the benefits that you get when you start continually packaging. So how do you get started with continuous packaging? Well, there's great news here. It's really good. It's highly probable that you have some of these components in place already, because continuous packaging it's an evolution of package management processes that you already employ. You're already pushing built artifacts to repositories, and you're consuming assets and dependencies during your build processes, and you're deploying artifacts to systems or end users. You have some of these core processes up and running already. But what you need now are new best-in-class cloud-native tools for package management to go alongside the cloud-native tools for CI and CD that are already available. This gives you a glue layer to tie these all together, gives you that single pane of glass, a centralized universal repository for all your artifacts. And from that, you get the visibility, the controls, and the performance that enable you to build a truly cloud-native software pipeline. Okay, so you've decided that this sounds great, and it's definitely something you want to explore further. So what do you do? How do you get started? Well, the very first thing I can say here is don't panic. No, seriously, do not panic at all. And I mean that with all sincerity. Now, you obviously need to evaluate the current state of your software stack. What on-premise or cloud-hosted tooling do you have in place at the moment? What are the renewal timeframes for licenses? Or is anything approaching end of life or being deprecated? And also look at the product roadmaps for the solutions you currently have. Is there anything that you'll need in the near or slightly longer term even that you don't see there? The key here is to put a time frame in place, to plan where you want to get to and by when. And then talk to cloud native software vendors. Lean on them. This is what they do. Every week, I'm talking to prospective customers that are just starting out with a cloud native migration. And although our area of expertise is package management, I hear the same things over and over about their entire end-to-end software development pipelines. There's an amazing amount of commonality. And often, the easiest way is a parallel migration. Switch over one team or project or service at a time, starting with the smallest or the least impactful. This is a model we see all the time. It enables you to dip your toe in the water, so to speak, and grow in confidence as you progress. So in short, although for each organization, their migration path will be unique, to us as a cloud native vendor, it's not. We have experience doing this. We've helped many other customers to do it, and we can offer help and advice to get you moving. So where can you see and learn more? Well, my colleague Andrew, one of Cloudsmith's staff software engineers, is leading a masterclass at 9 a.m. tomorrow to take a deeper look at some cloud native pipeline examples and using continuous packaging principles. So definitely do join that to find out more. Andrew is a great guy. He's one of our most experienced engineers, and I know there will be some really good takeaways from his masterclass. I hope what you've heard today has helped to clear up some of the core differences between cloud hosted and cloud native, and showing you a little bit about what we mean when we say continuous packaging, and also removed some of the fear about starting a cloud native migration. The benefits are there to be realized, and going forward, you do stand to gain a lot. Even if you're not quite ready to begin this journey right now, you can at least begin to start thinking about it. Now, this is something we're always happy to discuss further. So come and see us in the Cloudsmith digital booth. We'll be happy to talk more about cloud native pipelines and continuous packaging and walk through some demos with you. We're a chatty bunch, so it really would be great to see you. And the first 100 people to complete our survey get an Amazon gift card. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this talk today. I had left some time for questions and answers, but as is usual for me, I've spoke for too long. But I would see you at the Cloudsmith digital booth, and please enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. We'll be back on the main stage in about 5 minutes with our next talk with Sean Stacy. Be right back.